Okay, so we're back and ready to really get into the weeds of this Joshlin Smith case.
It's a wild one, right? And today we're going to focus on Laurentia Lombard and her whole dot situation. She went from being one of the accused to suddenly flipping and becoming a state witness, which, means her words are basically dot gold now.
Yeah, it's huge. And that puts her in a really tricky spot, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. You're Lombard. You're admitting to being involved, but you're also offering up information hoping for, a lighter
And
sentence.
deal.
Exactly. So the defense is going to be all over her, right? Looking for any little slip up, any inconsistency, anything to make her seem less believable to the jury.
It's a gamble for sure. So we got the actual court transcripts and expert analysis to kind of help us break it all down. So where do we even begin with this? I mean, right away, Lombard says she confessed because she wanted no longer hide things. Claims she just wants to be honest, come clean.
Right.
But the test attorney, Fanie Harmse, he's the one representing Jacques and Boedo Apollos. Well,
Yeah.
he's not buying it at all. Of course not, and he shouldn't. His job is to poke holes in her story, right? Maybe even suggest, she's got an ulterior motive, like revenge or something.
Ooh, that's interesting.
But here's the thing that I find even more interesting. We've got this whole other kind of shadow figure in this case. This guy, Ayanda Letoni, Lombard's boyfriend, owned that car wash in Midelpos, and some people think, well, maybe he's more tangled up in this whole thing than anyone's letting on.
Oh, wow. Okay, so we've got a possible confession, but the motives are really murky. Andy, we've got a mysterious boyfriend.
Yep, that's about right.
So Lombard is saying Ayanda never actually interacted with Joshlin, just, recognized her as Kelly Smith's daughter, and that he left Saldana, way back in March 2024, before Lombard was even arrested.
Right, and that timeline is super important because if he was already gone when all the serious stuff went down, it kind of messes with any theories about him being directly involved with Joshlin's,
Disappearance.
yeah. But this is where good detectives earn their paychecks, right? We got to look deeper. What about financial records from that car wash? Do they line up with what Lombard's saying? Or do they tell a different story? Maybe one where he's, pulling strings from afar.
That's a good point. We definitely got to follow the money on this one.
For sure.
And speaking of connections, Lombard's testimony about Boedo working at the car wash, it's all really vague. She said he helped about a day or two. Depends how many cars came to the car wash. I don't know about you, but that doesn't exactly sound like a regular job, does it?
No, not really. It definitely raises some eyebrows, right? Is she being evasive on purpose? Or is it just, her memory's fuzzy? It's hard to say for sure. But if the prosecution is trying to connect Boedo to the crime, they need a stronger link than him showing up for work every once in a while.
Right, right. Okay, so I'm noticing a pattern here.
Yeah.
Lots of loose ends, lots of questions without answers. And then we get to the whole thing about Lombard's drug use. She admitted to using, 2 or 3 times a day?
Yeah.
And yet she's adamant that she never smoked at Ayanda's place because he was strict about it. Now, does that seem a little, I don't know, off to you?
Well, the defense certainly thought so. Harmse jumped right on that. He brought up earlier testimony that suggested both Boedo and Kelly did de facto smoke at Ayanda's house. So he's basically trying to paint Lombard as a liar, or at least someone whose memory is, shall we say, selective because of the drug use.
It's like he's saying, hey, if she's lying about this, what else is she lying about? And get this, Judge Erasmus actually stepped in, urged the defense to double check the trial record. It sounded like they were kind of twisting Lombard's words,
Yeah, that's a big deal. When the judge steps in like that, it sends a message. He's basically saying, hold on, I'm not so sure about this. Doesn't mean Lombard's in the clear, but it's a win for the prosecution, at least for now.
Okay, so we've got conflicting stories about drugs. A judge who's keeping everyone honest is getting more and more complicated by the minute. But it brings up a bigger issue, right? How do you judge the testimony of someone who's, an addict?
It's a tough one, and honestly, it's something courts struggle with all the time. I mean, studies show that drug use can definitely mess with your memory, but it doesn't automatically mean you're a liar, right? The jury has to figure out, is this a genuine gap in memory or a deliberate attempt to mislead everyone? And that's not an easy call to make.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And we have to remember that being an addict doesn't mean you're incapable of telling the truth.
Nope.
It just adds another layer of complication to this already messy situation.
Exactly.
And honestly, I think we've only just scratched the surface here. This is just the tip of the iceberg. All right, so we're back and still digging into this Joshlin Smith case. I got to say, it's starting to feel like we're lost in a maze here. We've got Lombard's testimony, which is
Well, confusing, right?
Admissions mixed with claims of wanting to come clean and then, like, these really convenient gaps in her memory.
Yeah, it's like someone took a perfectly good puzzle and swapped out half the pieces for ones from a completely different puzzle.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Yeah,
That's good.
So now we're sitting here trying to figure out, like, what picture are we even supposed to be putting together?
And the defense is definitely pushing their own version of the picture, right?
Yeah.
They're really trying to hammer home the idea that Lombard just can't be trusted, bringing up her drug use, highlighting all the inconsistencies to make it seem like, well, like she's making things up.
Yeah, that's a pretty standard move for the defense. If they can get the jury to doubt a key witness, it can really throw a wrench in the whole prosecution's case.
So, okay, let's try to look at this from a different angle for a sec.
Yeah.
What if Lombard, IS, telling the truth, or at least what essay she believes is the truth? Like, what if those memory gaps are real? You know, a side effect of all the drugs she was using, not some, like, calculated move to trick everyone.
The question, isn't it? The million-dollar question. And to be honest, there's no easy answer. It could go either way. She might be being completely honest as far as she can remember, but those memories might be all jumbled and incomplete.
Okay, so then how do we make sense of this? I mean, as listeners, or even like if we were on the jury, right? You've got this woman who's admitting she was involved in something shady, but she's also struggling with addiction. It's tempting to just write her off completely, but what if we're missing something crucial by doing that?
Well, I think this is where critical thinking comes in, right? It's about looking beyond the surface. Don't just accept everything at face value. Dig a little deeper. Like, is there anything else that supports what she's saying? Do other witnesses back her up, even in small details? And then, okay, what about the stuff that contradicts her? How do we balance all that out?
Man, my head's spinning. But I like it. So basically, we can't just go with our gut feeling or like what we assume happened. We got to look at the whole picture, all the angles, be open to the idea that maybe the truth is a bit, messy.
Exactly. And it's important to remember the defense isn't just trying to, like, tear Lombard down. They're also trying to build up their own story, one where their client is less involved, maybe even a victim of circumstance. Remember all those questions about Boeda's job at the car wash? That was all about downplaying his connection to everything.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, but wasn't that where Lombard's testimony got all vague? Like she couldn't even really say how much he was getting paid there? That would definitely make me wonder if I was on the jury.
Yeah, and you should wonder. Because sometimes being vague can be just as telling as an outright lie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Makes you think, what are they not saying? What details are they conveniently leaving out?
So, okay, we're trying to figure out Lombard, but we also got to be aware of what the defense is up to. Man, it's like playing chess in the dark.
Right. And then, to make it even trickier, we have this whole other layer of the mystery with Ayanda Letoni. Lombard's saying he left Saldana months before she got arrested, but what if that's not the whole story?
That's what I keep going back to. Remember we talked about following the money. What if he's still involved with the car wash financially, even if he's not physically there in Saldana?
It's definitely something investigators should be digging into. If there's a financial link, it could mean he's like a puppet master, pulling strings from a distance while making it look like he's totally out of the picture.
Oh, man, that's a little creepy. Like he's hiding in the shadows, calling the shots.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe I'm getting carried away.
No. Hey, it's not impossible. We can't rule anything out at this point. Especially in a case like this, sometimes it's the smallest detail, the one everyone overlooks, that ends up cracking the whole thing open.
But what you're saying is, stay sharp, listeners. Don't miss a thing. That tiny little clue, that offhand comment, could be the key to solving this whole puzzle.
You got it.
Right.
And that's what makes this case so fascinating, right? It's like a giant mental workout. We're sifting through layers of testimony, conflicting accounts, evidence that doesn't quite add up. It reminds us that the truth is often, well, it's complicated. And sometimes it takes a lot of effort to uncover it.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, we've definitely done a lot of digging in this part of our deep dive, but there's still one big question hanging over everything. What impact could Lombard's testimony have on the trial's outcome? We'll tackle that and a whole lot more in the final part of our exploration of the Joshlin Smith case. All right, so here we are, the final part of our deep dive into Laurentia Lombard's cross-examination. We've really gone through it all the nitty-gritty details.
Yeah.
And now I think it's time to address the elephant in the room. What does this all mean for the trial? Like, big picture, what's the impact going to be?
It's like we've spent all this time sorting through these puzzle pieces. Some of them fit together. Some of them, I don't know, they look like they belong to a different puzzle altogether. And now we got to figure out, can we make a picture out of this? A picture that's clear enough, strong enough to convince a jury.
And Lombard's testimony, that's like the The centerpiece, right? The make it or break it piece. If the jury believes her, if they buy her whole, I just want to do the right thing story, that could be it for the defense. But if they see her as, I don't know, unreliable, an addict with maybe an axe to grind, the whole case could fall apart.
Imagine you're sitting there on that jury. You've heard her admit to being involved. You've heard all the inconsistencies, the contradictions. You've seen the defense tear her apart piece by piece. So the question is, do you believe her? Or do you think, wait a minute, there are too many holes in this story? And if you think that, well, maybe the other defendants walk free.
That's a huge responsibility, right, being on that jury. But even if the defense somehow manages to completely discredit Lombard, it doesn't necessarily mean the other defendants are innocent, does it? It just means the prosecution has to find a different way to prove their case.
You got it. They're going to need to lean on other evidence, bring in other witnesses, and basically build a whole new story. A story that's strong enough to stand on its own, even without Lombard as their, star witness.
Right, right. So who else should we be watching for in this trial? Whose testimony could really shake things up? I know there are more cross-examinations coming up.
I'm really curious to hear from anyone who can shed some light on those unanswered questions we keep bumping into. Like, can anyone confirm what Lombard said about Ayanda Letoni leaving Saldana? Or is someone going to come forward and say, nope, that's not how it went down?
And what about all that back and forth about the drug use at Ayanda's place? If someone backs up Lombard's story, that could really help her out.
Right.
But if someone contradicts her, well, that could be the final straw for the jury.
Every new witness. It's a wild card, right? Another piece of the puzzle. Maybe it fits right in. Maybe it changes the whole picture.
It's funny. We spent all this time talking about Lombard, but we still don't have a clear answer to the most important question. What happened to Joshlin Smith?
That's the question, isn't it? It hangs over everything. And yeah, Lombard's testimony gives us some hints, some possibilities, but it's just one side of the story. One person's version of events. The truth. The real truth about what happened to Joshlin, maybe that's still out there somewhere, hidden in the shadows, waiting for someone to find it.
I don't know. There's something about this case that just feels, well, unfinished. Like we've peeled back all these layers, examined all this evidence, but the core of it all, the part we really want to know, it's still a mystery.
And that's the thing about these complex cases. There's rarely a nice, neat ending. All the loose ends tied up, everything explained. More often than not, you're left with questions, doubts, the feeling that maybe we'll never really know the whole truth.
But maybe that's okay. Maybe the real lesson here, the real reason we do these deep dives, isn't about finding all the answers. Maybe it's about learning to live with the uncertainty, to accept that things are messy, that there are different sides to every story, and that justice, well, it's a process.
It's about remembering that we're dealing with real people, real lives. People make mistakes, their memories are fuzzy, their motives are complicated, and sometimes even with mountains of evidence, we might never know for sure what happened.
So to everyone listening, as we wrap up this deep dive into the Joshlin Smith case, just remember, stay curious, keep asking questions. The search for truth, it's a journey. It's not always easy, but it's important. And who knows, maybe someday we'll finally get the answers we're looking for.